Welcome to America's #1 Cincinnati-based museum podcast, Meanwhile at the Museum, where we speak to those who work for and live for Cincinnati Museum Center. We have our producer, Magic Mitch, on the ones and twos.
Hey.
I'm Cody Hefner, and today we're joined at the Beat Laboratory by Brian Pollock, who is Cincinnati Museum Center's mad scientist, cool chemist, badass biologist, botanist.
Sure, sometimes.
Yeah, but technically manager,
STEM resources.
STEM resources.
Yes.
So how many of those did we hit? How many of those are accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I do science-y stuff quite often. I just did a chemistry show for Layers, which was really fun.
Do you have a favorite show? Like, do you have...
Ooh.
We're just jumping in strong.
Okay, so this has been a very active month. So I just did the intermission show at the Cincinnati Cyclones Field Trip Day.
Nice.
For 13,500 screaming children.
Is that your biggest audience?
That is, I think, Museum Center's single biggest audience ever.
I saw the buses downtown.
Yeah,
for
like
that.
60 of them.
Yes, they were lined up.
It's like 2 miles of buses.
It was insane. It was incredible.
Yeah.
13,500?
Yeah, and we did the liquid nitrogen explosion for the second intermission show. So that's it. That's my favorite.
All right, so paint the picture for us. What's that look like?
So we have like one of those big, like 50-gallon blue trash cans that we fill the bottom of, maybe bottom fifth or so, with warm water. We fill a 2-liter bottle, unbranded, of course, with liquid nitrogen, screw the cap on, and then the liquid nitrogen starts to expand. So I very quickly get it out of my hand and into that trash can, and we throw a couple of bags of Energy Zone balls on top.
Just like the round plastic ball pit balls,
Yeah,
right?
ball pit ball, yep. And then as the nitrogen starts to boil and expand, it builds pressure in the bottle. When it gets to about 150 pounds per square inch, 200 pounds per square inch, somewhere around there, the bottle bursts. That's about 15,000 pounds of force, and it launches those Energy Zone balls, 25 feet in the air, probably.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a powerful enough explosion that whole trash can full of water jumps a foot off the ground. It's pretty incredible.
What's the purpose of the water?
So the water does a couple things. One, it protects the trash can from blowing out the bottom, because it would. But two, probably more importantly, is that it provides a little bit more predictability on the timing. So that warm water provides a lot of heat into the system, so it boils that liquid nitrogen a little bit faster. Without it, you're just waiting for the air to do it, and that's a less efficient transfer of heat. So that's the biggest reason for it.
Do the kids go crazy?
Oh yeah,
Do they all go nuts?
Oh yeah, they scream. I didn't get a decibel reading this year, but last year the on ice decibel reading that the paramedics got, it was dangerous. So I was wearing ear protection. I always do for this experiment anyway. It's not that loud, but I do anyway, just in case. And I ask people to cover their ears. But without it, my ears would have been ringing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How many years have you done that?
This is our third year doing it.
Do you always do the same experiment?
No, sorry, this is our second year. I think we were invited back. So we've done the same thing a couple of years in a row. They have some requests for they want us to build a hovercraft, like a hover chair kind of thing.
All right.
But we have to convince exhibits to help us out and find time in their very busy schedules. But I think we can do it. I think we can find a way if we're given a year's notice.
So you're saying the only barrier to you building a hovercraft is our exhibits team's time?
Yes.
Everything else you have figured out?
Yeah. It's not actually all that difficult. It's not even all that expensive, but it would involve cutting very large sheets of plywood, which I'm not going to try to do on my own without their help.
Is this proprietary information, or do you want to?
No, you can find instructions all over the place. So it's basically just a big sheet of plywood with a tarp stapled to the bottom, with some very strategic holes cut in it. And then the source of the air is a backpack leaf blower that pushes down and provides that cushion of air that the hovercraft rides on. And then the propulsion is also a leaf blower, or you can use a CO2 fire extinguisher. CO2 fire extinguisher to provide that rocket propulsion.
Have you done this on a smaller scale before?
I have ridden on one. I've never built one.
Really?
Yeah. I studied physics, so this is the type of stuff that some professor would have for a demonstration in freshman physics class. Yeah.
So you have a physics degree.
I do.
That's amazing. So you're a physicist.
Sure. I mean, I don't
Why don't
do
we put that on
research
your
right
badge?
now. Well, I don't do research, right? So this comes up all the time. Are you a scientist, right? Like people ask me this all the time, and I have two different answers depending on who I'm talking to. So I work a lot with academic audience, so I work with professors quite a bit. And if they ask me if I'm a scientist, my answer is no. I don't do research. Like I make a distinction there. To them, I would say I'm an educator. I'm a museum educator. When a child asks, are you a scientist? My answer is yes. I study science. I do sciencey stuff. I do experiments, things like that. But I think there's different answers for different audiences.
No one's ever asked me if I'm a scientist.
Yeah, not surprising.
I mean, to some degree, aren't we all scientists?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so all humans are curious and want to learn more about the world in some ways or another. Kids especially are extremely curious and constantly experimenting. So a lot of people say that kids are natural scientists. I say that kids are sloppy scientists and they don't do enough documentation and they don't control their experiments tightly enough. But they're doing science all the time.
That's actually a really good distinction. I think that is because Mitch is right. We're all scientists because we're all trying things, and we'll get to this a little bit. But think when you're cooking something, a lot of stuff you cook so many times you don't measure, and so you're just going through, and every now and then you're like, I did something different. It wasn't as good as it was last time. But because you didn't record your process and your measurements and everything, you don't really have anything to go back to say, here's how I'm going to improve on this. Yeah. You're just like, well, I guess I'll just have to do it by feel better next time, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the biggest things that separates academic research science from everyday life is you're documenting everything so you can find patterns and you're making intentional changes, right? So really that the scientific method boils down to making intentional choices, trying to change only one thing at a time, and then recording everything. And then after that, it's mostly data analysis, right? It's like looking for those patterns and things like that. So, but yeah, that's what scientists do. They make very intentional changes and they record everything they do.
There are so many scientists who come to mind when you think of famous scientists throughout history. Do you think any of these individuals, like, were they rock stars of their time, or do you think it was kind of the same?
Well, some were. So, like, Tycho Brahe was a rock star.
Who?
Tycho Brahe?
Sure.
Yeah,
he had a gold nose. That he had lost a bit of his nose in a dueling fight. He kept a moose in his house that died when it got drunk and fell down the stairs. I mean, this guy was a rock star for sure. He's an astronomer.
What time period is
Wild.
I think it was around
20th century, 19th century?
15 or 1600s.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Right.
It was during one of those times when people were really figuring out how the planets and the stars and all that stuff. He was an astronomer, right? So, but yeah, that dude was a rock star, and some of them were. The status of scientists now, there are some rock star scientists, but most of them are working in obscurity until they get a huge discovery or something like that.
Do you think it's harder to make your name as a scientist now than it was then? Because I think someone could say, hey, I discovered another planet in 1500s. People are like, that's cool. There's another one out there. Let's keep it going. It's so like, hey, I have an explanation for why everything keeps falling down. But now, we know a lot of the basics, and of course, as science gets a little more refined and complicated, we get deeper and deeper into it. Is it harder to drill down and really like make a name for yourself or find that next startling discovery?
So I think I don't want to diminish
this?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, well, I don't want to diminish the accomplishments of people who worked in the past. They had to make insights and hard decisions and things like that too. And some of those discoveries were hard earned. Some guys worked for 30 years before they were able to find their discoveries. The biggest difference, I think, is that there are few breakthroughs to be made. Most science is incremental. It's small changes to our knowledge. We're learning a little bit here and there, and breakthroughs are less common. Think of one of the most recent breakthroughs that I can think of that's really, really big is some of the gene editing stuff. So there was one person one team who discovered some of the gene editing kinds of things, like CRISPR-Cas9, for instance, was a really, really big breakthrough. They found this bacterial gene editing equipment, essentially, like a tool they could use. But a lot of people have made incremental advances on that and made it useful. CRISPR-Cas9 was not that useful when it was first discovered. And a lot of the useful stuff that has come out of this gene editing stuff has been incremental and less of a breakthrough, right? But really, really important. I mean, we're using stuff like this now to treat some diseases. So it's hard to make a name for yourself and become famous. But that's sort of the nature of science. It's incremental. It's always advancing, and there's fewer breakthroughs, but there's a lot of really exciting stuff to be found and done.
Where does Dolly the sheep fall in that? Is that part of it?
So Dolly's a rock star. Is a scientist who cloned Dolly a rock star? Do you know their name?
No, no, that's true.
Right? And I think that's another thing that's happened is that the actual
Dolly
name
live?
reckoned for a while.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, that was the breakthrough, is that there was this cloned sheep that lived for a while. We now have some cloned organisms that live full lives. There's entire lines of cells that have been used over and over and over again for research that are essentially cloned. Cloning mammals is extremely difficult, and it's probably going to be a while till we can successfully clone at a large scale. And then, of course, there's ethical questions of whether we should be cloning at large scale.
Why is cloning mammals so hard?
It's just there's some complications in our genes that in the way they work. I don't know all of the details of it, but I know that cloning insects, for instance, or like worms is quite a lot easier than cloning mammals. I have a feeling it has to do something with gestation. Like if an animal lays an egg, you can just incubate that egg. But a mammal is gestated in the womb with a placenta, right? So this is a much more complicated process. You have to implant and all that stuff. If it's an egg, you just incubate an egg.
I guess if you're dealing with organisms that lay multiple eggs at a time, whereas a lot of mammals are kind of one-to-one or relatively small litters. So
the most you have in a litter is maybe a dozen, and very, very often it's one or two, right?
How many do they have in 101 Dalmatians?
Didn't they find some more somewhere?
I don't think they were all one litter.
No, there were like 13 or 14, but then, they went to the Cruella's house and they found all the other ones.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I grew up on a farm. I grew up around animals, and I'm pulling what I know of
but
dog litters from.
But like a cow has one calf at a time, typically, right? It's very rare otherwise. Some animals like deer will very often have one or two. Pandas pretty much always have two, but that's kind of the limit, yeah.
But then in a lot of those cases, one of them doesn't survive.
Yeah.
Isn't that the case?
Yeah, that's part of the strategy. So with pandas, they typically always have two, and then the mother panda will make a difficult decision on which one seems like they're going to survive and thrive, and usually cuts off the other one from feeding.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Pandas are savage.
I'm going to cut in here to note that throughout the episode, you'll hear Brian talk about the importance of fact-checking himself, and he did. He listened to the whole episode and checked out all the information that he provided to us, and we found that pandas have litters of two about half the time rather than most of the time. But when they do, the behavior towards the cubs is as Brian described.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard world out there. Their diet is not rich in nutrients. They eat bamboo, which is a hard life. And I mean, if a human made that, they'd be a monster, right? If they made that decision. But the animal world works differently sometimes. So.
There's always that guy that runs around every year who eats only Skyline for a month or something like that. But
I wouldn't recommend it. For a month, you're probably going to be okay unless you have something else going on. But not for your life.
I clear your calendar. I don't know. Sticking with cloning a little bit, but
sure.
Or are you a fan of science fiction?
Oh yeah, I
Are
love science
you
fiction.
interested in that?
Yeah.
And how much of it, when you read it and when you consume it, are you thinking it's not that far-fetched? It's just
some of it. I mean, it depends. So I really like space-based science fiction, And to me, all of it seems so far-fetched. Just the idea of space travel, I think, is mostly beyond us. This is a bad movie, so it's maybe a bad example, but we recently watched a movie with Jennifer Lopez. I can't remember the name of it, but they were traveling to Andromeda, and they just got in their spaceship and traveled to Andromeda. Andromeda is hundreds of light years away. No, I think it's 2 million light years away. It's 2 million light years. We're never going to Andromeda.
Right.
We're probably not going to Alpha Centauri, and that's only 4 light years away. We might never even go to Jupiter, and that's not even that far, right? Mars is like, it's been how long since we went to the moon and we're not going back? Mars is doable but difficult. Past Mars, I won't see it in my lifetime. I'm quite sure of that, and I'd be surprised if humans ever leave our solar system.
For a while, it was almost like there's like this exploration bent of science, and where have humans not gone before? Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. Is part of that just kind of human hubris? That's things like I can conquer that. I can.
There's definitely some
this,
of that, yeah.
And how much of it is there are all these really great uses and implications for it. I know, now there's a lot of talk about resources and scarcity and things like that.
Sure.
But how much of it do you think is just that pioneering spirit?
There's definitely some of it where people were kind of out for glory. There's also, I think, we have to think about funding when we're talking about this, right? Like every dollar we spend one place is a dollar we can't spend somewhere else. And so, for instance, NASA's budget, some people are constantly trying to cut NASA's budget. NASA's budget is tiny when we look at our national budget. But when you have something like the space race, it really ramps up resources. And so we can direct those resources together, and we get all of these knock-on effects, right? There's the type of technology that came out of the NASA program is hugely beneficial to all humans, not just people that are going to space. And so getting people excited about these big things, that's why people are always looking for the next moonshot, because it directs funding and people get excited about it and they're willing to spend resources on it. And so some of it is, it starts to snowball. Like people start to get excited, and then the people that are making decisions and trying to get funding are continue to ramp up that excitement, really try to push it. Some of it is marketing, right? They're trying to get people excited about this so we can work together. We can all push in the same direction and make incredible advances.
The marketing piece, probably not going to answer it here, but it is curious to think, had it not been for the Cold War, would we have gone to the moon, or would we have done it in that time span, on that schedule, or it was likely have been a collaborative effort?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but the energy around beating the Soviets to the moon was certainly a big factor in the Apollo program. Since then, we have collaborated with other nations. The International Space Station is international, right? And the other countries' resources have played a big role in that. The U.S. does not have our own craft that we can send people into space. Like NASA does not have a craft. The U.S. government doesn't have one. So we send people to space either on Russian craft or on private craft. We don't have a spaceship anymore, right?
Isn't that crazy? But
it's wild.
It's also, it's like it's gone backwards. I mean, you think of the early, sea explorers and stuff. A lot of these things are privately funded by people, not necessarily nations.
Yeah.
That they're sailing on. They have to. They're still raising money. I believe I can do this. I want to go do this, and raising the dollars to buy a ship and a crew and everything to do it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the bigger accomplishment? Beating the Soviets to the moon, or the 1980 U.S. men's hockey miracle on ice?
I'm going to say going to the moon.
Do you really?
Yeah.
We were bigger underdogs in the hockey game than we were going to the moon. I
don't know about that.
Yeah, the Soviets beat us on a lot of milestones.
But we
were the first to space.
But we were like neck and neck, right?
We
were the only two in the game.
The Soviets had the first satellite to orbit. first artificial satellite, Sputnik.
I know. I've seen Transformers 3.
Yuri Gagarin was the first human in space, right? Like they beat us in a lot of different places, and then we eventually caught up, and we won that race. But they were ahead of us when we started. And going to the moon is more impressive than winning a hockey game. I'm sorry.
It depends on who you ask. I mean, if it's for some of these other planets, people are going to be able to go to the moon multiple times.
How many times has someone won the gold medal in hockey? How many times?
I mean, every 4 years.
Yeah. How many times have we gone to the moon?
6.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
6. 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
6
times.
It's the content is in our museum right now. We're all looking around. Did we get it right?
Sure, yeah. Fact check a few things. Go back and fact check that panda thing too.
You have to look at the moment though. All right. You're a physicist. You are a scientist.
Sure.
If we asked you if you were a scientist,
when I'm at the museum, usually I say
yes.
Usually I say yes.
So you studied physics in college.
That's correct.
Right. So I studied history at the, as you're about to graduate, you have to do this capstone where you can. Did you same thing with physics? I'm assuming.
So I went
I started in zoology. I started in a science discipline that lasted a year and a half, and I was out.
Yeah. So. Actually, I started in education.
Okay.
I didn't really like my education classes. I probably should have stuck with it because that's what I do now. So at Miami, you had to take a senior capstone, but it didn't have to be within your field. So my senior capstone, I went to the Bahamas for a 2-week botany course.
Mine, I tried to get them to just can I go to DC to look at these paintings? And I don't think you need to. But they just, what'd you do with the Bahamas? What was the point?
Yeah, so that was it was tropical and subtropical botany of the Bahamas. And so we looked at plants. So you are a badass botanist. Sure. I study plants. I can tell you about Metopium toxiferum and the Anacardiaceae family, or Stachytarfeta jamecensis, a little purple flower that lives in the side of the road in the Bahamas and Jamaica and in the Caribbean.
The one you said sound like the Kardashian family of plants.
Anacardiaceae?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anacardiaceae is, so that's the, Metopium toxiferum is the poisonwood tree, which is it's related to poison ivy, has the same toxin, and that's the Anacardiaceae family.
Well, okay, yeah.
So this will let you into a little bit of way my brain works. I can remember Stachytarfeta jamecensis. I can remember Cocos nucifera. I have a hard time remembering the names of my coworkers very often.
You just need to get. If everyone went by,
I just need flashcards.
Can you spell those, though?
Ooh, probably, but I'd want to write it down.
Wow, that's crazy. So you were studying plants in the Bahamas?
Yeah, but just for 2 weeks.
What was your argument? What was the?
It was just a course. I took a course.
Did you come back and show your professor a photo album? Look at.
Nope. I went for 2 weeks to study plants in the Bahamas. I remember a lot of it. It was great. It was really cool.
Oh my God! I wrote a paper in the library.
Yeah. I did do when I was at Miami. I did undergraduate research. So Miami is really, really big on undergraduate research. And so I got into a lab my sophomore year, and I was in there for 3 years working with Dr. Samir Bali, who's still there, and studying cold atom clouds. So we did laser cooling and trapping. We used lasers to push rubidium atoms towards each other and created a really cold temperature ball of atoms, like microkelvins. So almost absolute zero. And that's really, really interesting research. I mean, it's very cool. No pun intended. But
are you doing this in a box?
Yes, it was a vacuum. There's a vacuum chamber with windows on the 3 axes, 6 windows, all opposing each other, and we would shine lasers into there. There was a magnetic field on it to align the atoms, and then the lasers would just give a little bump to an atom. So if it tried to leave the cloud going in a certain direction, the laser would just bump it back in. It would give it a little bit of momentum, push it back in, and slow it down. there's some really cool stuff going on. There's a Doppler shift that goes on. So if you're familiar with the Doppler shift, it's when, if you hear a siren on a police car go by and goes, "Eeew," like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the Doppler shift. As it's coming towards you, it's higher frequency. As it's going away from you, it's lower frequency. Light experiences a Doppler shift also. So we tuned the lasers so that as the atom traveled towards the laser, it was Doppler shifted into resonance and could push it. And then as it moved away from the laser, it was out of resonance and it didn't see the laser anymore. So it just pushes everything back to the middle, confines everything, slows it down to microkelvins, very, very cold stuff.
Does it create a little cloud?
Yeah, little ball. And then as soon as you turn it off, it just kind of slowly cascades and falls.
So what are like some applications of that kind of technology?
Yeah, so the applications, you can make really high precision clocks, like extremely high precision clocks. So it's good for that kind of thing. GPS satellites require high precision clocks. So in the future, you could imagine this kind of clock in a satellite out there helping us to pinpoint our GPS location more precisely, things like that. There's some other interesting physics that goes on. So you're creating a condensed cloud. You can create another form of matter, another phase of matter. So typically we think of solid, liquid, gas. Plasma is actually the most common phase of matter in the universe because that's what stars are made of. But you can create this condensed matter cloud that is, it's called a Bose-Einstein condensate. And it acts kind of funny because of, I know, this is really nerdy stuff. But a Bose-Einstein condensate is a phase of matter that has different properties. And the more we learn about that, the more we understand particle physics and things like that. There's some quantum effects that go on too.
All right. So anyway, you're here at Cincinnati Museum
Yes.
Center. When did you join the museum?
I joined in 2008, so I've been here 16 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. You have your CMC driver's license now.
I do.
What do they let you drive? Now,
They let me drive the Programs on Wheels cars.
That's
I just
cool.
drew one to the Cyclones game.
How do those things handle? Pretty nice?
They're fine.
Okay.
I mean, they're like transit van kinds of things, right?
Are they like littered with Mountain Dew bottles and beef jerky wrappers?
No,
like
actually,
other
they're-
company
they're-
cars?
They're kept quite clean.
I know Cody's been itching to drive one of our forklifts. Have you driven a forklift?
I do not have forklift training. I have never driven a forklift.
There was a forklift training going on down the hall earlier this week, and I peeked in. There was a video playing, and I kind of gathered that it might be forklift training. Someone confirmed that it was. But I'm not allowed to. I was specifically told I'm not allowed to drive the forklift.
I have driven a forklift, but not here.
I've driven one in the past, too. It's a great time. It's a real fun time.
I think they're afraid if they let you drive the forklift, then you'd want to be moving around artifacts. And
I'm just saying, there's probably an opportunity where, I'm down an exhibit for install. Mitch is there getting video. Miranda's there getting photos. I'm there doing nothing. And they could use another set of hands. And if I'm trained in more of those things, I could be more helpful.
it's a great argument.
So you joined in 2008.
Yeah.
What was your first job here?
I was an exhibit program specialist in the Museum of Natural History and Science.
It fits that you've kind of stuck on the science side.
Yeah, I've had 7 titles.
Have
since
you?
Since I've been here. And I would say my job has changed only a little.
How long have you had your current title?
My current title has been 3 years.
Oh,
4
so
years.
you're due.
Yeah, right.
So what do you do today? What's your current role entail?
My role, so I'm in the program development team, and so we develop programs that occur on the museum floor,
Or outside of it?
or outside, yeah. And so I do primarily the science programs. Evan Lewis does primarily the history programs. Aaron McCandless does primarily the art and children's, like early childhood type programs. We don't write all of the programs. We write some of them, but we sort of oversee them, ensure that they're credible and that they're sort of meeting our quality standards and things like that. So I do primarily science programs. So if you've seen the stage shows, I developed most of those. I also work a lot with university partners. So whenever anyone gets federal funding on a grant, they have a requirement to do what's called a broader impact. So a broader impact can be a wide variety of things, but most of the time that means public outreach and education. So I work with them. A good example is Dr. Reza Sultanian, who used to be at UC, since moved to Texas, studies groundwater and aquifers. And so he had a federal grant to do research, and then he worked with us, and we developed a couple of demos that are on the museum floor that you can see now, relating to groundwater and aquifers, aquifer recharge, groundwater pollution, things like that.
Is this the one where you pour water over different surfaces and watch?
Yep.
So have you seen this, Mitch?
I have. It's really cool.
It's so fun.
Yeah,
it is.
That's me. I did that.
Yeah, it's awesome. It reminds me of being a kid, but it so clearly illustrates it, and
Yeah.
you can so quickly and easily apply that to any situation you can think of. Oh, this is what the park looks like. Oh, this is what happens or drive it. It's so evocative of things that people see every day.
Yeah.
And it helps them understand. It gives you kind of a cutaway view of what's happening under the surface and where the water goes.
Yeah, that demo really hits the sweet spot for me. We're using the actual phenomenon that we want to talk about. This isn't extended in some sort of metaphor or something like that. This is the actual phenomenon, but it's simplified down in a way that you can really understand quickly. And then, we can pretty easily come up with examples. The city of Cincinnati has a lot of flash flooding and a lot of stormwater runoff and things like that. So because of the shape of our city and the age of our city, and specifically our sewer system, we're also one of the cities that has to spend the most money to deal with landslides. So again, this is all water related.
Which is wild, because you would think it would be, a mountain city or somewhere that has really towering hills. I know Cincinnati is a city of 7 hills, and they are out and around there. But yeah, you don't think of it because you think of the Midwest as relatively flat.
Yeah, but I mean, we decided to cut into the side of a hill on the east side of the city and build a pretty major road over there, and so now, US 50 has landslides every year.
Yep.
They're constantly doing landslide mitigation there. They're doing cleanup projects. They're building new walls. They're planting plants, and we still have to deal with it every year, right? So it's more or less a constant problem. But this demo is great because it's using the real thing, right? And that's one of the things that Cincinnati Museum Center holds as an important philosophy for our programming. So this doesn't involve an object. A lot of this times we think of museum programs, we think of fossils or historical objects or things like that. And whenever we can, we use those. This is about a phenomenon. In this case, it's surface composition and how it affects water runoff and things like that. So we're using the real phenomenon, and it has just so much power to it to be able to see that kind of thing in action.
Is there a program that you've developed that you're most proud of, or particularly proud of, any that jump out to you?
Oh, that jump out to me? Well, we did some jumping spider programs recently.
So does that involve actual jumping spiders?
We do. We have done with actual jumping spiders. Jumping spiders are not super long-lived, so we don't always have one in-house.
This sounds like a nightmare.
But we do have some really fun programs that we've done surrounding the jumping spiders. So I developed one that is called That Looks Delicious, and it's about how jumping spiders use their color vision to discern whether or not they want to eat a particular prey item. So some jumping spiders can see full color vision like we can. So they have, I say full, they can see red, green, and blue. And just so their vision is very similar to ours, and that helps them discern whether or not they want to eat something. And so we show the benefit of color vision by removing your color vision, by filtering what you can see and asking you to. So it's basically a game that we're playing, where people have to put on these red filter glasses and then try to figure out if this is orange or blue or green or purple or yellow or whatever. So that one's really fun. What am I most proud of? I don't know. I'll just come up with a recent example. Maybe it's not the most proud, but I for layers, I just did a chemistry show, and I did no talking whatsoever. It was just music and color changing and fire on the Rubens tube. And my second show, I got the timing absolutely perfect on an iodine clock reaction. So it was really fun.
What's a Rubens tube?
Rubens tube is it's a metal tube with regularly spaced holes drilled in it and a flexible membrane on the end. So it's like a piece of balloon or latex rubber, right, on one end with a speaker butted up against it. And on the other end, we pump in a flammable gas. So we're using propane. And then we light the whole thing on fire. So the gas escapes out of those little tiny holes. We light it all on fire, and it looks like, a row of, 70 candles, right, like all next to each other. And then you play music or sounds on the speaker. It vibrates that rubber membrane, and that vibration causes a pressure wave to propagate inside the tube, which changes the height of the flame at each location.
So does it create kind of the sound wavelength through the flames?
That's right. So if you get it just right, if you find a resonant frequency, you can actually see like a sine wave if you play in a pure tone. Usually we play music because it's very dynamic, and so that jumps every time there's like a bass hit or things like that. And then every once in a while you'll see a sine wave very briefly as that note's being played and things like that.
So for anyone listening, to summarize this, with a physics degree, you could be the pyrotechnician for like KISS or something, right?
Sure.
Who else has a lot of fire?
I saw CreEATe this summer, and there was a lot of pyrotechnics at that one. I was surprised.
Man, this is going to really tap into our CreEATe base, which we've not done enough of. Do you feel like a rock star when you're doing this kind of stuff? Like, you feel...
Yeah, so
like...
every once in a while. So like I said, I just played the same arena as Billie Eilish, right? So that helps.
That's pretty awesome.
I was only on stage for 10 minutes total between 2 intermissions, but still, I had probably just as many screaming fans as she did. So,
do you have to walk on the ice? Do they roll a little carpet?
Oh no, we gotta walk on the ice, and it gets really slippery because as soon as that explosion happens, there's water all over the ice, and so there's water on ice, and we have to pick up everything, and it's quite slippery. So we have help from they have people with shovels that go out
like
during
skating ice crew.
Yeah, the skating ice crew. So they helped us, but they're wearing skates. I'm not, so I had to be really careful.
Could you do it in skates? Do we need to put you in skates next time?
Maybe
we can plan some for you.
I took ice skating and ice hockey in college.
You took a legit ice hockey class?
I did.
That's awesome.
I took broom ball too. I'm not terribly good at it, but I did take it. We sure did. I was surprised. That was the most successful athletic team I've been on at Museum Center.
I got so many penalties for high sticking. So many, and I got really mad at the ref, and the ref was like, "Dude, you just
keep it lower.
Act like your elbows are pinned to your hips."
Yeah.
And I'm like, because in hockey it would not be a high sticking, but in broom ball,
not at all.
Crazy.
Yeah, but if you just lifted it above your waist, it was high sticking, no matter what you're doing with it.
Did you buy the shoes?
No, I never.
When you played?
Shoes. No. But I did learn a lot about, like, Dave is really athletic and good at. Yeah, Dazinski is good at broom ball.
He's a Michigan boy.
Yeah, he was good at hockey, right? That was a little surprising. It was the first time I'd ever seen him do anything like that, and I was like, holy cow.
I used to get sandbagged by him in racquetball.
Oh yeah,
very good, because he's also it's similar principles. A lot of angles and between hockey, broom ball, racquetball, and he's just very good and very smart about that. Whereas I'm just like, I will effort into it.
Yeah.
And I played hockey, so it's interesting because I don't remember, like, growing up and going to practice and stuff talking about, like, angles and using the boards and stuff. But you just kind of, like, finesse. You figure it out somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that honestly, that knowing those angles is less helpful than you want it to be in the moment. You just can't really calculate, right? You at some point it has to be feel.
Different rinks have different little tricks to them. I think it was Detroit's rink. Behind the goal, there was like a seam, and so people would always try to, they send it into the corner so it'll just wrap around the boards and pop out the other side. But opposing teams didn't know. So you would send it in, and it would hit that seam, and it kind of bounce back in front of the net. Yeah. So the goalie would, like, try to go around and play it, and it bounce back out, and easy goal.
Empty net, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, so how do we get... All right, we talked... You played the same stadium as Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. Do you
like the same week.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
She could have had you do
I know, right?
The pyrotechnics.
Call me.
You could be the opening act. Do you find kids or adults being more engaged and excited when you do these programs?
Usually kids. I mean,
Really?
kids are, yeah. I really like adult audiences too, though. I would say that my science knowledge in particular is very, very broad. A handful of areas where it goes deep, but not, but usually it's just I love science. I love learning about science. I know a lot of different things. And when it's adult audiences, they are more likely to come up and want to chat.
Yeah.
Just, here's a person that seems like they know things. I want to ask you all the questions I've had for the last 10 years.
So like what Cody's been doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like talking to Cody. Yeah, I don't know what
Which is exhausting.
any of the things that we talked about earlier have to do with my work at Museum Center, and I don't care.
But I think with kids, what we do here at the museum, we try to encourage curiosity. We want kids to ask questions. We want kids to just watch and kind of wonder why, to see different parts of the museum and just get the wheels turning. And I think that's a real benefit of museums, because in school, your curiosity can only go so far before it stops serving your grade in the moment, which is a challenge. But adults, then they kind of just get to pick and choose what they're curious about. And so sometimes I think that's what's fun when adults come back to the museum where they get to see a program. They realize, oh, this is cool, and I loosely remember this, but now I think I have the faculties to understand it, which I fall into that trap a lot, and I don't. But it's fun for adults too, because they get to revisit these things, or it's either a concept that they thought was kind of neat when they were a kid and they hadn't thought about it for a while. It's an experiment they've seen maybe when they were younger, and now they get to see it again and appreciate it a little more. But it is fun, and it's great that you're doing these programs, and the audience is so broad too. Yeah,
and so what you're describing is the reason I'm here. So I've been here 16 years. I finally am thinking about myself as a museum person. But
How did you think of yourself before?
So I didn't come here to be a museum person. After I graduated college, I realized that I didn't want to be in a dark laboratory in the basement taking data all day, every day, and that I wanted more variety in my day, and I wanted to see the sun from time to time. So I got into informal science education. I started at an environmental education camp, and then spent a couple years doing like zoo camps and museum camps. I was in Portland, Oregon for a little bit. I also worked in a formal setting in a special ed classroom, which I really enjoyed. But I didn't really want to do formal education, but I wanted to do informal science education. And after a while, having that job be seasonal and having to be outside no matter what the weather is, it gets a little old. And I wanted a career where I could do informal science education, and the museum was the place that could provide that. So I didn't come here because it's a museum. I came here because it was a stable place with a career in informal science education. Now I love museums, but it didn't when I got here. Like, I just didn't really care that much about museums. But I love the opportunity that I have now, and I love being able to see all. Like, I was less of a history guy before I got here, and now I'm pretty into the history of it, and so.
That's because you're getting to that.
I got some gray in my beard, so now I got to start watching World War II documentaries or whatever.
It's just like it finds you.
Yeah, right.
Real quick, let's hit on the culinary aspect.
Absolutely.
And so the culinary science,
sure.
and what you're doing in our CreEATe Culinary Studio.
The food science stuff is certainly Elizabeth's passion and has been for a long time. So this was probably like 2009 when she was in marketing, and we were going to a radio station for, I think it was Bugfest. So it was going on the radio, like 700 WLW, to talk about Bugfest. And on our way up, we were just chatting about food and food science and things like that. She was geeking out about it then too. And since that day, she has been trying to find ways to get me to do food science stuff at the museum. So now we fast forward all the way until, October of last year. We finally opened the CreEATe Culinary Studio. which now I'm in there all the time. And we have it set up so we can have 20 people at a time, all cooking together, working on different recipes. We don't just do food science, but we do that. So we talk about the chemistry and the physics of the food that we're cooking, sometimes even the biology of the plants that we're working with or whatever. But we also use it to talk about culture and history. We use it, to engage the senses with kids and things like that. So it's been a really fun place. This work started out of a grant with Kent State University, where we were working with a couple of professors whose research question was, does food as a topic increase family engagement with science topics, with STEM? And if you ask anyone that does science education, especially informal science education, they'll tell you, obviously, yes. The way academics work, you have to research it. You have to publish it. You have to prove it. And it really hadn't been researched well. And so I'm now a co-author on a paper showing really good results on increasing family talk about science when using food as the subject. And so we then spun this into the CreEATe Culinary Studio and sort of expanding our efforts. And now we have several different series of classes. We have a homeschool class that we do on Thursdays. We have a lot of people coming back over and over and over again. I'll shout out one of the students who's come, Vivian, who made us magnets of our favorite food. She was there so many times.
That's awesome.
It was amazing.
That's sweet.
But yeah, tons of great interactions in there. We have a group with kids and caregivers that we do on Saturdays called Junior Chefs. So they're actually like parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles, whoever, cooking with the kid, and they're working together so that the kid is the chef, the caregiver is the sous chef. They're there to help, and they get to have this bonding experience, create new recipes, things like that. We've also got some that we're doing with the Osher Center at UC. So really like food as medicine that we're doing with adult audiences and teen audiences. So it's been a really great experience. It's really fun to be in there. I love being in front of people and talking. I discovered this after I got a fitness tracker watch, that my heart rate actually goes down when I'm doing public speaking, which makes me, I think, a weirdo.
That's cool, though.
But I love it. I find my flow, I get into it, and I enjoy it. So it's been fun doing that.
I mean, you're in there cooking French toast and omelets, making cakes and pizzas from scratch, liquid nitrogen ice cream, which is...
I just did that last night.
Did you?
Yeah, we made pumpkin liquid nitrogen ice cream for, I don't know, some group that was in.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm doing it again tomorrow for Ruthven's birthday. We're doing a birthday celebration with liquid nitrogen ice cream.
Yeah. No one lets me call them derrieres. But you're...
I don't mind it so much. I have a compulsion to make puns when I hear them, particularly music-related or food-related puns. So I'm down with derrieres.
Do you have a favorite recipe that you do in the culinary studio, or one that you're just dying to get into the lineup?
So we got really ambitious this summer with our summer camps, and we made croquembouche, which is a famously difficult to pull off dish. And we were doing it with, like third graders.
Yeah.
So it's a stuffed puff pastry that you then make into a sculpture almost. Traditionally, it uses caramel, but that sounded dangerous because that's like molten sugar.
Yeah.
We don't want people to burn themselves, so we used marshmallow fluff instead. But we made cream puffs that we stuffed. The kids made them. I didn't make them.
How'd it go?
They were great. They were so good.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so we really stretched ourselves with that, and I think we gained a lot of confidence after that one. Like it doesn't matter what the recipe is, we can make it. Like we're ready to go. So I'm very proud of that one. I thought it was really fun, and they were really tasty.
Do you consider yourself a chef? I mean, do you cook a lot?
Am I talking to kids or am I talking to chefs?
Fair enough.
So we introduce ourselves as
You're talking
chefs.
to Mitch now. You're talking to kids.
Yeah, right. Right. We introduce ourselves as chefs. I cook professionally, right? Now, chef is also one of those words that like people train to become chefs, and I don't want to diminish that either. That is there's a skill and a training and an education that goes into it. So this is just like, am I a scientist? This is one of those things that one of the things that is really good about experiential education, like we do at the Museum Center, is helping kids to find an identity, to be able to see themselves as someone who could be a chef, who could be a scientist, right? So being able to identify with that early is really important to seeing that as a potential career. So we call ourselves chefs so that kids can identify with that. They could see that as something that they could do in their lives. So sure, I'm a chef. Why not?
You've got the jacket and everything, right?
I got the jacket. Yeah.
Do you have the hat?
I don't have the hat. I
Oh,
need
we gotta
to
get some.
So we
You
did
need
when
more?
we made the croquembouche. We wore the toque.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of them for the kids, and they wore it because we were doing the French recipe. We wore the hats.
That's awesome. That's
we
fun
have
for them.
some more French recipes planned for our Julia Child
We
exhibit.
do, yeah. I'm not the person to ask on a. We hired Megan, who is a real chef, and Megan is amazing. And so I've just not really thought about much about the food since Megan came on because she's so good at it that I don't need to be as concerned. So for a while we were down a person, and it was most of my job was in the CreEATe Culinary Studio. Now I'm support. I get to talk about science, and I get to pepper in the science
There you go.
facts
A little peppery
from time
on
to
top.
time.
If you had to pick a walk-up song for yourself,
Yeah, I thought about this ahead of time.
have you?
Yeah.
What you got?
So this was one of those things that I overthought it for sure, which meant I couldn't actually come up with a good song. But I will say, I have a food science playlist that I created.
You do. I've heard this.
I actually have 3 of them. So we have a kids' safe food science playlist. Not all food science are
Bop
kids safe.
Food science.
I don't put any Kids Bop on there. I can't bring myself to do that. But I was very proud. The very first song on there is "Holding Out for a Hero" by Bonnie Tyler. So we're gonna call that my walk-up song.
That's a good one.
It's a food song, right?
Yeah, that's really. All right, last question. If you could trade roles with anyone in the museum for a day, who would it be and why?
Yeah. So this is another tough one. Part of me wants to say Jenny Yang because I love a spreadsheet. Really, I don't want to do spreadsheets for my job all
Yeah.
day, every day, but doing some finance spreadsheets for one day, that could be kind of soothing. That sounds fun to me.
Not if it's during audit season.
Yeah, no, not that. That's why I don't want it to be my all-day job, my everyday job.
Just one.
But my other answer, and this is maybe more of like somebody who I've actually been jealous of at the museum, Erica Schultz, doing some of the fabrication down in the shop.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people say Dave. I don't have the artistic skill necessarily to do what Dave does, but I am pretty handy. I have a wood shop. I make a lot of my own stuff. So
Do some woodworking, some welding. That's what you want to get
I
into?
think I've never done welding, but I would love to learn. So yeah, I think Erica's my answer.
There's got to be a science program in there somewhere, right?
Sure.
Why are welds stronger than the metals themselves?
Yeah. Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Probably.
let's talk to Erica. We'll make this happen. You'll get to do some welding.
I love it.
Everyone's
I love
happy.
It. I'm happy for sure.
Brian, thanks a lot. This is great. Thanks
Thank you.
for letting us ask all of our science questions, dude.
This is, I would say, somewhat of a typical interaction that I have. That someone's like, "This guy knows things. I want to ask him things."
We didn't trip you up, so
I feel pretty good about most of the things I said, but I'm definitely going back and fact checking myself on all of this stuff.
is it the panda one?
The panda one is one of them.
Okay.
I mean, I know I have heard this before. I'm pretty sure it's right, but I'm gonna check myself. And then there's a couple other things. I'll go back and listen, and I'm gonna if I shoot you notes, you'll do corrections, right?
Yeah, Mitch has your back.
Yeah, good.
Don't worry.
I have been here for 16 years. One of the very first things I learned, actually I probably learned this before I even got here, when the campsite I was at before, was that our bedrock in this area is limestone, but you can also find granite here. Granite did not form in this area. Granite is a volcanic rock, and we don't have volcanic rocks here. It got here carried south from Canada by glaciers. It's called a glacial erratic. I have looked up the term glacial erratic to check myself dozens of times. I'm going to go back to my desk and check myself after this. I'm like 99.9% sure it's called a glacial erratic, but I have to check myself.
Every time?
I think credibility is extremely important. You and I almost went to blows over whether
You remember that too? Oh my God.
I sure do.
I
Yes.
appreciate a good fact check.
Yes.
So I will be fact checking myself. I do that all the time.
Well, listen, if anyone else has science questions that you want to ask
shoot 'em
Brian,
my way.
email us at meanwhile@cincymuseum.org. We'll get them to Brian. We can, if we get enough submissions, we'll do a whole listener-generated science episode.
Oh, I love that.
So get those questions in. Brian, thank you. We really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. Remember, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe. But most importantly, come see for yourself. Visit cincymuseum.org for the latest reasons to visit. And we said it before, any questions or comments, email us at meanwhile@cincymuseum.org. Thanks for listening.